Imagine a young boy, far from home. His name was Barquq. He was not born in a palace. He was not the son of a king or a wealthy merchant. His story begins in the vast, windswept lands of the Black Sea region among the Circassian people. This was a world of proud tribes and fierce warriors, a place of high mountains and deep valleys. Barquq was born here around the year 1339. We don't know the exact day, as the lives of boys like him were not written down in official records. His future seemed small, maybe just to be a shepherd or a fighter like his father. But destiny had a very different and much more dramatic path planned for him. The world in the 14th century was a turbulent place. Raiders and traders swept across lands and life could change in an instant. For young Barquq, that change was brutal. He was captured, taken from his family and his homeland. He became a slave. This was a common fate for many Circassian boys at the time. They were known for their strength, their intelligence, and their loyalty. Slave traders saw them as valuable goods to be sold in the great markets of the Middle East. Barquq was just one of many, a nameless face in a crowd of displaced youths, his future now in the hands of others. The journey south to the bustling foreign city of Cairo must have been terrifying and confusing for him. In Cairo, the heart of the mighty Mamluk Sultanate, Barquq was sold. His new owner was a man named Yalbuga al-Umari, a powerful Mamluk emir, or commander. This was a pivotal moment. For a slave boy, being bought by a powerful man could mean a lifetime of servitude, or it could be an opportunity. Yalbuga was a kingmaker, a man who held immense influence over the Sultan himself. He was always looking for bright, strong young men to train as Mamluk warriors. These were not ordinary slaves. They were a military elite, trained from boyhood to become the most formidable soldiers and administrators in the Islamic world. Barquq had just stepped onto the first rung of a very tall and dangerous ladder. Life in the barracks was tough. It was a world of strict discipline and relentless training. Barquq learned to ride a horse like it was a part of him. He mastered the sword, the bow, and the lance. He studied the Quran and learned the art of politics and courtly manners. He was no longer just Barquq, the boy from Circassia. He was now a Mamluk, part of a unique brotherhood. He learned to speak Arabic and to navigate the complex social world of the Cairo citadel, the center of all power. It was here, among other boys just like him, that he began to show his special qualities, his intelligence, his ambition, and his quiet, watchful charisma. He was learning, growing, and waiting. The Mamluk system was a paradox. It was built on slavery, yet it offered a path to ultimate power. A Mamluk could, if he was skilled and fortunate, rise through the ranks to become an emir, a governor, or even the Sultan himself. This was the dream that fueled the ambition of every young recruit, including Barquq. He excelled in his training under Yalbuga al-Umari. His master noticed his potential, seeing in him a sharpness of mind that matched his skill with a sword. Barquq was not just a follower, he was a leader in the making. He formed friendships and alliances with other Mamluks, especially those who, like him, were Circassians. These bonds would become the very foundation of his future power. Politics in the Mamluk court was a deadly game of chess. Emirs were constantly plotting against each other and against the reigning sultan. In 1366, Barquq's own master Yalbuga was assassinated in one of these power struggles. This could have been the end for Barquq and his fellow Mamluks. They were scattered, imprisoned, or forced into hiding. Barquq himself was exiled for a time, but this period of hardship only strengthened his resolve. It taught him a crucial lesson: to survive in this world, you couldn't just be a good soldier. You had to be a master politician, able to anticipate your rivals' moves and forge alliances that could withstand the constant turmoil of the court. After his exile, Barquq managed to return to Cairo. He carefully began to rebuild his position. He was patient and calculating. He joined the service of other powerful emirs, always making himself useful, always proving his loyalty while secretly building his own network of supporters. The Mamluk Sultanate at this time was ruled by a succession of young weak sultans from the old Qalawunid dynasty. They were mere puppets, with real power being fought over by competing Mamluk factions. Barquq saw the weakness and the chaos. He saw the opportunity it presented. He and his close ally, another powerful emir named Barquq, became the real power behind the throne. Al-Mansur Ali II was the son of Sultan al-Ashraf Shaban, who had ruled Egypt from 1363 to 1377. After his father was overthrown and executed during a military revolt led by the Circassian Mamluks, Ali was placed on the throne at the age of 6 or 7. Like many other young sultans, he was used as a puppet ruler by the powerful Mamluk emir Barquq, who controlled the court and the administration. By 1377, Barquq and Baraka were acting as co-regents for the young sultan. They effectively ruled the empire together. But in a world where only one person can sit on the throne, such partnerships rarely last. The two powerful emirs soon became rivals. The court was split between their supporters. It was a tense and dangerous time. Barquq proved to be the more cunning of the two. He outmaneuvered Baraka using a combination of political skill and military strength to isolate his rival. Within 6 months, Al-Mansur Ali II was deposed. His brother, Haji II, succeeded him as another child sultan. Haji II came to power after the violent overthrow and death of his father, Sultan al-Ashraf Shaban, and the short, ineffective reign of his brother, Ali II. At just 10 years old, Haji II had no real authority. The sultanate was controlled by powerful emirs, especially Barquq, who was the real power behind the throne. In 1382, Barquq made his final move. He deposed the young puppet Sultan Haji II, ending the long rule of the Kalawunid house. He took the throne for himself, becoming the first sultan of a new Mamluk dynasty, the Barquq or Circassian Mamluks. Becoming sultan was not the end of the story, it was the beginning of a whole new set of dangers. The throne that Barquq had fought so hard to win was not a comfortable seat. It was a place of constant threat and instability. The Mamluk system that had allowed him to rise was the very thing that now threatened him. Every powerful emir in Cairo looked at Barquq and saw what was possible. They thought, if a Circassian slave like him can become sultan, why can't I? This meant Barquq was surrounded by ambitious men who were once his peers and were now his potential rivals. His every move was watched, his every decision questioned. His enemies were not just inside the palace walls. The older Mamluk factions, mostly of Turkish origin, were deeply resentful. They saw Barquq as an upstart. He was a Circassian, the first of his kind to rule, and he had broken the line of the old Turkish Bahri dynasty. They saw his rise as a threat to their own power and influence. These emirs, who had held sway for generations, were not going to give up their privileges easily. They began to whisper in the shadows, forming secret plots and waiting for any sign of weakness from the new sultan. Barquq had to be constantly vigilant, trusting few and always watching his back. One of his most persistent early enemies was an emir in Syria named Mintash. Syria was a vital province of the Mamluk Empire, and its governors were powerful figures. Mintash, along with another rebellious emir named Yalbugar al-Nasiri, not to be confused with Barquq's first master, saw Barquq's new reign as an opportunity to carve out their own power base. They openly defied the Sultan's authority and raised an army against him. This was a direct challenge to Barquq's rule. If he could not control Syria, his reign in Cairo would be seen as weak and could quickly collapse. The first years of his rule were therefore consumed by this internal conflict. Barquq had to prove that he was not just a clever politician, but also a decisive military commander. He had to show his rivals that rebellion would be crushed. The struggle against Mintash and his allies was a long and difficult one, stretching across the sands of the Levant. It was a war fought not just with armies, but with spies, diplomacy, and betrayals. Barquq had to use all the skills he had learned on his long journey from the barracks to the throne. The stability of his new dynasty and his very life depended on his ability to defeat these internal challenges and unite the Mamluk realm under his undisputed control. It was a test of fire for the new sultan. Having seized the throne in 1382, Sultan Barquq's first reign began. It was a period marked by the immense challenge of consolidation. He was the founder of a new dynasty, the Barquq Mamluks, and he needed to establish its legitimacy. This meant replacing the old guard with men loyal to him. He carefully promoted his own Circassian Mamluks to key positions in the army and the administration. This was a necessary step to secure his power, but it was also a risky one. It created deep resentment among the established Turkish Mamluks who were being pushed aside. The court became a nest of competing factions, and Barquq had to navigate this treacherous environment with great care and political skill. During these early years, Barquq focused on bringing order to an empire that had been weakened by years of infighting and weak leadership. The economy needed attention, the administration needed reform, and the authority of the central government in Cairo needed to be reasserted, especially in the far-flung provinces like Syria. He worked to stabilize the currency and ensure the vital grain supply from Upper Egypt, which fed the massive population of Cairo, was secure. These were not glamorous tasks, but they were the essential work of a ruler. He was trying to build a solid foundation for his rule, proving that he could be a capable administrator as well as a successful warrior. Barquq also understood the importance of symbols. To be seen as a legitimate Islamic ruler, he needed the support of the religious scholars, the ulema. He showed great respect for Islamic law and tradition, consulting with judges and scholars on important matters. He also began to invest in public works, following the tradition of great sultans before him. This was a way of showing his piety and his concern for the welfare of his subjects. By commissioning repairs to mosques and building public fountains, he was making his mark on the city of Cairo, visibly demonstrating that a new, powerful and benevolent ruler was in charge. These actions helped to win over the hearts and minds of the common people. Despite his efforts, the undercurrent of rebellion never ceased. The plots against him continued, culminating in a major revolt in 1389. Led by his old enemies, Mintash and Yalbuga al-Nasiri, the rebellion gained significant support among the disaffected Mamluks in Syria. This time, the rebels were successful. They marched on Cairo, and after a series of battles, Barquq's support crumbled. He was overwhelmed, captured, and deposed. His first reign, which had lasted for about 7 years, came to an abrupt and humiliating end. He was sent into exile, imprisoned in the formidable fortress of Al-Karak in what is now Jordan. For any other man, this would have been the end, but Barquq was no ordinary man. Imprisonment in the remote, sun-scorched fortress of Al-Karak was meant to be the final chapter of Barquq's story. From the heights of the Sultan's throne in Cairo, he had fallen to the depths of a lonely prison cell. His enemies in Cairo placed Sultan Hajji II on the throne again and began to divide the spoils of power amongst themselves. They believed that with Barquq locked away, their own positions were secure. But honestly, they underestimated the network of loyalty he had built, and they completely misjudged the man himself. For Barquq, this period of exile was not an end, but a time to reflect, to plan, and to wait for his moment. His spirit, was not broken. The rebel emirs who had overthrown him, Mintash and Yalbuga, soon began to argue. Their alliance had been one of convenience, built only on their shared opposition to Barquq. Once he was gone, their own ambitions and greed drove them apart. Chaos returned to Cairo and Syria. The administration faltered, and the people suffered as the new leaders fought amongst themselves. This was the opportunity Barquq had been waiting for. His loyal supporters, who had been forced into hiding, saw the growing disorder and began to rally. They knew that only Barquq had the strength and skill to restore stability. They smuggled messages to him in his prison, and a daring plan for his escape and return began to take shape. In 1390, after less than a year in exile, Barquq escaped from Al-Karak. It was a bold and dramatic move. He quickly gathered a force of loyal Bedouin tribes and Mamluks who flocked to his banner. His return was not just a military campaign, it was a popular movement. The people of Syria, tired of the chaos caused by the warring emirs, welcomed him as a liberator. His march from Al-Karak towards Damascus and then on to Cairo became a triumphant procession. The forces of his enemies, divided and poorly led, could not stand against his renewed momentum. They had overthrown a sultan, but they had failed to govern. The final confrontation took place outside Cairo. Barquq's army, though perhaps smaller, was united by a powerful cause, the restoration of their rightful leader. The battle was decisive. Barquq's forces shattered the armies of his rivals. He re-entered Cairo not as a captive, but as a conquering hero. The city celebrated his return. He was restored to the throne, this time with his authority stronger and more secure than ever before. He had faced the ultimate test of a Mamluk ruler, being overthrown, and he had triumphed. The experience had taught him harsh lessons, and he returned to power a wiser, more ruthless, and more determined ruler. His second reign was about to begin. Just as Barquq had finally secured his throne from internal enemies, a terrifying new threat appeared on the horizon. From the east, a new conqueror was carving out a vast and brutal empire. His name was Timur, known to the west as Tamerlane. He was a warlord of incredible ambition and cruelty, who saw himself as the heir to Genghis Khan. His armies were sweeping across Central Asia, Persia, and into Iraq, leaving a trail of devastation and conquered cities. By the early 1390s, Timur's rapidly expanding empire bordered the Mamluk territories in Syria. A confrontation between the two most powerful rulers in the region seemed inevitable. Timur was a master of psychological warfare. In 1393, he sent envoys to Cairo with a message for Barquq. It was not a friendly greeting, it was a demand for submission. Timur demanded that Barquq place his name on Mamluk coins and have it mentioned in Friday prayers, the traditional signs of acknowledging another ruler's overlordship. This was an ultimatum. To accept would mean the end of Mamluk independence. To refuse would almost certainly mean war with Timur's seemingly unstoppable armies. The Mamluk emirs in Cairo were terrified. Many counseled caution, urging Barquq to appease the fearsome conqueror. Barquq, however, was not a man to bow before a threat. He had fought too long and too hard for his throne to simply give it away. In a stunning act of defiance, he had Timur's envoys executed. It was a bold and incredibly risky move, a clear message to Timur that the Mamluk Sultanate would not be intimidated. Barquq immediately began preparing for war. He strengthened the fortifications of the Syrian cities like Aleppo and Damascus. He assembled a large army and marched into Syria himself, showing his emirs and his people that he was ready to lead them against this foreign invader. He also engaged in diplomacy, seeking an alliance with the Ottoman Sultan Bayezid I, who was also threatened by Timur's expansion. The great clash of titans, however, never happened in Barquq's lifetime. Timur became preoccupied with campaigns elsewhere in India and Russia, giving the Mamluks a precious breathing space. But Barquq's firm stance had been crucial. He had shown Timur that Egypt and Syria would not be an easy prize. He had united the Mamluk realm against a common enemy and asserted its strength on the world stage. By refusing to bow, he preserved the independence of his empire and cemented his own legacy as a strong and fearless leader. He had faced down the most feared conqueror of his age and had not flinched. The shadow of Timur would loom again, but Barquq had ensured his empire was ready. Like the great pharaohs and sultans before him, Barquq understood that power must be visible. It needed to be set in stone to awe and inspire future generations. After securing his rule, he embarked on an ambitious building program that would forever change the face of Islamic Cairo. He wasn't just building for himself, he was building for his new dynasty. Each new mosque, school, or tomb was a statement of the power and piety of the Burji Mamluks. This architectural patronage was a way to legitimize his rule, create jobs for craftsmen, and leave a permanent mark on the capital of his empire. His constructions were designed to be both beautiful and functional. His most famous and magnificent project is the Mosque Madrasa Kanka of Sultan Barquq. Located in the very heart of medieval Cairo on the famous street of Bain el-Kasrain, it stands today as a masterpiece of Mamluk architecture. Begun in 1384, during his first reign, it was a vast complex. It wasn't just a place for prayer, it included a madrasa, a school for teaching the four main schools of Sunni Islamic law. It also had a kanka, a monastery for Sufi mystics, showing his support for different aspects of Islamic life. The building is renowned for its grand entrance, its beautiful courtyard, and its exquisite details, from the intricate marble floors to the stunning gilded and painted wooden ceilings. The construction of this complex was a major undertaking. Barquq poured enormous resources into it, hiring the best craftsmen and architects of the time. The result is a building that feels both monumental and elegant. The minaret is tall and graceful, a landmark on the Cairo skyline. The great bronze-plated doors at the entrance were actually taken from a Crusader citadel in Acre, a symbol of Mamluk triumph. Inside, the tomb chamber, topped by a magnificent dome, was intended as the final resting place for the Sultan himself. Standing in its courtyard today, you can still feel the ambition and vision of the man who commissioned it. Although he was eventually buried in a different complex, his Kanka in the northern cemetery, his legacy on Bain al-Qasrain is undeniable. These buildings were more than just stone and mortar. They were centers of learning and worship that reinforced Cairo's position as the leading city in the Islamic world. They proclaimed that the new Circassian dynasty was not a temporary accident of history, but a powerful force committed to upholding the traditions of religion, culture, and art. Barquq, the boy who had arrived in Cairo as a slave, had now inscribed his name permanently onto the very fabric of the great city he ruled. Sultan Barquq's reign was not just about battles and buildings, it was also a time of great cultural and artistic vitality. A stable and prosperous empire often leads to a golden age for the arts, and Barquq's court was no exception. He was a keen patron, understanding that art was another way to express the glory of his dynasty. Under his rule, the workshops of Cairo produced some of the most beautiful objects of the late Mamluk period. This included exquisite metalwork, with lamps, bowls and trays inlaid with intricate patterns in silver and gold. These were not just everyday objects, they were works of art that showcased the incredible skill of Mamluk craftsmen. The art of the book also flourished. Calligraphers, illuminators and bookbinders were highly valued. They produced breathtaking copies of the Quran with pages decorated in gold leaf and lapis lazuli. These were masterpieces of design where the beauty of the script was matched by the richness of the decoration. Historical chronicles and works of science and literature were also copied and illustrated. Barquq's royal library was a treasure trove of knowledge and beauty, a testament to his commitment to learning. By supporting these arts, he was preserving and enriching the intellectual heritage of the Islamic world for future generations to study and admire. Glassmaking was another area where Mamluk artisans excelled. The beautiful and ornate enameled mosque lamps are among the most famous products of this era. These lamps, often decorated with the Sultan's name and titles or verses from the Quran, would have hung in the great mosques he built, casting a soft, colored light over the worshippers. They were symbols of both piety and wealth. High-quality textiles, including luxurious silks and carpets, were also produced and were highly sought after in markets from Europe to the Far East. The court of Barquq was a place of elegance and sophistication, where artistic excellence was encouraged and celebrated. This cultural flourishing was a direct result of the stability that Barquq fought so hard to create. When the empire was at peace and the economy was stable, patrons had the wealth and the confidence to invest in art. Artists, in turn, had the security to perfect their craft. The period of Barquq's rule, therefore, represents a vital bridge in Mamluk art history. It continued the great traditions of the past while also laying the groundwork for the art of the later Burji period. The legacy of Barquq is not just in his military victories or his stone monuments, but also in the delicate glass, intricate metalwork and beautiful books created under his patronage. Sultan Barquq died in 1399 after a second reign of 10 years. He had ruled for a total of 17 years, a remarkable achievement in the turbulent world of Mamluk politics. He was succeeded by his son, Faraj, securing the future of the Burji dynasty he had founded. This dynasty would go on to rule Egypt and Syria for over a century, until the Ottoman conquest in 1517. His most immediate legacy, therefore, was the establishment of a new ruling house that would shape the history of the Middle East for the next 130 years. He had successfully transferred power from the old Turkish Mamluk elite to a new one dominated by his fellow Circassians. His impact goes far beyond just a change in dynasty. Barquq's lasting achievement was the restabilization of the Mamluk Sultanate. He inherited an empire weakened by internal strife and ruled by powerless puppet sultans. Through ruthless determination, political genius and military skill, he pieced it back together. He centralized power, subdued rebellious emirs, and defended the empire's borders against the terrifying threat of Timur. This provided a period of relative peace and security that allowed the economy to recover and culture to flourish. The magnificent buildings and artworks from his reign are a direct result of the stability he created. He left the empire far stronger than he found it. So, what can we learn from this man who journeyed from slavery to the Sultanate? Barquq's life is a powerful story of human potential. It shows that circumstances of birth do not have to define a person's destiny. He began with nothing, a captive in a foreign land, yet rose to the highest position imaginable through his own intelligence, resilience, and ambition. His story is a testament to the fact that even in the most rigid of societies, there can be paths for advancement. It reminds us that perseverance in the face of failure, like his return from exile, is often the key to ultimate success. He proves that a person's will can be a truly powerful force. Barquq's story is more than just a dusty chapter in a history book. It is an inspiring tale of survival and triumph against incredible odds. He was a complex figure, a ruthless politician, a brave soldier, a pious Muslim, and a great patron of the arts. He was a real person who faced immense challenges and left a permanent mark on the world. When we look at the incredible mosque he built in Cairo, we're looking at the legacy of a man who refused to be defined by the chains he once wore. His life serves as a timeless reminder that with courage and determination, it is possible to rise above adversity and build something that lasts for centuries.